Hi, I'm Effie. This is What Effie Reads, and today I'm going to be tier ranking the books that I read in January. This is the first of 11 of these videos that I'm going to be doing in December, where I basically, in a sentence or two, summarize my thoughts and feelings about these particular books, whilst also tier ranking them. The reason I am doing it this way is because at the point of filming, I think I've read a little over 200 books in 2023. So doing a video where I talk about them all in one go just isn't something that is viable for me. More power to creators that are able to talk about 200 plus books in a single video and for it not to be over long. Also, I have a terrible memory, so there are going to be books, not necessarily today, but I know there are definitely some books that I've read during the year that I cannot remember anything about. So the tiers for the tier ranking is going to be the same every day, and those tiers are: I love the book and look forward to treasuring it for years to come. Pretty self-explanatory. Essentially, the books in this tier are kind of new favourites, the best of the best. I don't know how many there are because terrible memory, but I'm not expecting there to be too many in this tier, but we'll see. Then we've got impeccable vibes / good in the moment. So these are either books that I really enjoyed, but just weren't quite new fave level, or I had a good time with them, but they were the kind of books that I felt a little lost. And you know when you're reading a book and you're like, I'm just vibing, I'm loving it, I'm vibing, but like I couldn't tell you anything about this book. So the books in this tier fall into one of two camps. And then the next tier is going to be a deeply mid book, which is so self-explanatory, but essentially it's the books that aren't great, they're not awful, kind of, they're fine in the moment, but I'm not going to care about them, you know, months, years down the line. They're fine. Then you've got If You Can't Say Anything Nice. So this is a little bit of a contradictory category because in some ways, like, I'm not going to hold back. Like, if I don't like a book, I'm never one to hold back and not say kind of what didn't work for me. So I will be saying things that aren't very nice. But also in this category is books that, like, I know I've read. I have stats telling me I've read them this year, but I cannot remember anything about them. And that's sort of where If You Can't Say Anything Nice kind of comes in as a double meaning, because I couldn't tell you anything about these books. And then the very worst category, and I'm really hoping that over the course of 2023 I don't have too many books that are in this category, but I guess we'll see. And that is Yeet It Out of the Window into a Lit Barbecue During an Apocalypse. So these are the books that I despised, and that's not to say that my most hated books aren't going to be someone's all-time favourite books, but for me they just didn't work. So now we're going to get into January's tier ranking. Okay, so for the month of January we have 11 books, as I'm not going to be talking about rereads at all during this mini series of videos. So first up we have The Minders. So this book is following a group of people who get all of the nation's secrets implanted into their brain. It was a fun time in the moment, but not something... Actually, no, I didn't like this one. I'm going to put it as deeply mid. I think this was like... I don't know why it's ended up popping up there. Like, I think this was actually like my least favourite John Mars. Possibly. Oh no, her Last Move. That one, the police one, I hated that one, but The Minders I didn't like. In Mercy Rain is a short story set in the world of the Wayward Children. It takes place in the moors, and I am so sick of the moors. Like, This was a fine short story, but like I could live the rest of my life without any more trips to the moors. The Dark Side of the Sun, the Moon. I don't know. I always get confused with the Pink Floyd track, but this was, I think, possibly Terry Pratchett's debut. And you can see the speckles of what would later become Discworld. So I'm gonna say impeccable vibes, good in the moment. There's some really great like trans inclusive quotes, which is fantastic given this book's like 50 years old. Loved it. The Queering by Brooke Skipstone is a woman in her 70s or 80s, I think, that an angry podcaster is trying to out her, and she's just kind of trying to live her best life, but also she's writing the story of a tragedy that occurred in her early years. I loved it. I loved that we were following an older queer character. I loved the way the story went. Yeah, loved it. Her Body and Other Parties, I'm actually going to put in If You Can't Say Anything Nice. It's a little bit of, I can't remember that much about it, and a little bit of, I remember being very confused by it. It's a series of slightly connected short stories, I think, but also I went into it thinking it was the author's non-fic, which made it all the weirder when you were having fantastical things happening. Going Dark, this one's a hard one to judge. So what I will say is if you are the target audience for this book, this is probably going to hit a lot better. But for me, it's going to have to be If You Can't Say Anything Nice, because I despised it. I saw what was happening coming from like 3 pages in, if that. I mean, it's a bit more complex than like surface level, so I guess I can say nice things about it. It's talking about the way that there are racial injustices in the way that crimes are investigated, which I enjoyed, but also in terms of the actual mystery thriller element, it was pretty weak for me. But also, I am not the target audience for this book in terms of like, this is very much a YA and actually possibly a younger end of YA book. So, you know, don't take my critiques too to heart. Skeleton Song, I really loved it because this is also set, it's a short story set in the world of the Wayward Children, and it is the story of Christopher and Mariposa. The only problem is the existence of this short story means that we're probably never going to get a full-length Mariposa story, and that makes me sad, but I loved it. Little Disasters, I think this is about a like possible shaken baby. I picked this up just after watching Anatomy of Scandal on Netflix, which I binged with my father in January. I loved it so much, but this book didn't quite live up to the same promise that Anatomy of a Scandal did, so I'm gonna have to say deeply mid. Had some good twists, but also very forgettable as far as this genre goes. The One is a speculative book by John Mars, and it's the idea that like there's actually one kind of soulmate out for you, but it's the way that kind of that can be abused. And I found the multi-perspective initially kind of difficult to follow, but overall it was a really good story. So I'm going to say impeccable vibes. The Marriage Act was another speculative by John Mars, and it was looking at the way that smart devices could be abused and the way that a government could participate in that abuse, and overall a really solid book, but again, impeccable vibes, I'm going to say, for that one. And the final one that we're talking about today is Lost in the Moment and Found. And I don't even need to think about this. This is going in the top category that I love this book. This is about loss of childhood and the way that I guess trauma builds on trauma. I loved it so much, and it spoke to my soul. And we will be talking about the book that follows after this later on this month, because I have also read the next Wayward Children book. But that is the 11 books for January. I'm really glad that we don't have any in the lowest category so far. Okay, so that was January. I think not too bad. It was a pretty even spread across the categories. I'm looking forward to seeing what my tier list for February shakes out like, because I genuinely cannot remember how I felt about books, and it's kind of a surprise to me to review them. But I will be back with that, I think, in 2 days. I can't remember my release schedule for videos this month, but I will have a video tomorrow, so I will see you then. But until then, love you. Bye.